Hi guys, thank you so much for coming. Name is Maskym, and I'm gonna present myself real quick because where do I click it? Oh right, sorry. Yeah, so I'm gonna present myself real quick because there is a lot of stuff to go through. So I've been in gameplay animation for about 13 years. I've been working in Ukraine, China, Finland. And last year I was super honored to land this awesome job at this small house that we call Naughty Dog, right in Santa Monica, where I work on the player animations for The Last of Us Part 2. So, about the lecture, there is one interesting thing you could see from the slide before. All my life I've been working on third-person action-adventure games. I never done a single other type of a game. And the second thing that comes from it is actually I started with very, very small companies, very, very small budgets, no motion capture. And then a little bit of motion capture, bigger budgets, and so on and so forth, until the way when now we're making one of probably motion capture heaviest game in the whole industry, and we have great facilities and so on. So all this experience kind of through the years build up a certain methodology and certain like takeaways that I want to share with you guys today. A lot of it, though, based on Quantum, obviously, because I couldn't show a lot from Last of Us yet, but hopefully next year. All right. So just to start talking about gameplay animation, we need to understand why is it so like unique and why we're talking about it and why it's so different. So if we look on normal cinematic pipeline, there is like, normally you do like storyboard, previous planning, then you do all the coordination, shoot data, put it in, assemble into the scene, put on the cameras, and then you start polishing it up, right? So when you work with a gameplay animation, it's a very different beast. It starts with a massive list of movements and shoots. You need a lot of animation, starts, stops, transitions, shoots. Like, there are hundreds and thousands of them. I mean, in Uncharted, there are more than 3 hours of data that use just to move the character around, like just for locomotion, right? So you make all this planning, you put all this hard work, you shoot all this cool stuff, you're super happy, actors are crushing it, and the first day you come back from the shoot with all this data, and even before you start putting it into the game, you meet your best friend, lead designer, and he tells you, hey, remember this cover system that we recently discussed? And you're like, yeah, what's up with that? We have a great idea. We want to change it. All right? Yep. So, though, I mean, if there are any cinematic guys in the room, they're going to be like, this guy. Because basically what I did, I really simplified pipelines, and I did it just purely for clarity. Cinematic animation is also very complicated. Even small change done somewhere here can result in a lot of hard work and reworks all over the place. But I mean, I did that just to prove a point, because the gameplay animation is by nature a very different beast. Your goal is to make a feature that is functionally works correct. It feels and looks good when it's played. And hopefully, it is unique. So it's not like in any other game. It doesn't repeat the games. And to find a feature like that in the reality, no matter how genius you are, you need to build 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 features simpler, and then destroy them and find the one that's going to be really great. Okay? So to talk about motion capture and how we use it, we need first to understand the role of the responsible core gameplay animator in the motion capture kind of base production cycle of the game. So first thing, you have to be a yes man. So speaking about the GIF from the previous slide, the rage GIF, it's really wrong, right? It's really wrong. Because basically, your job is to enable people to find cool things. And especially in pre-production, if you're making a grounded, super realistic game and your designer comes to you and he says, hey, I have this great idea, let's try to make the character who walks on walls. And you're like, what do you mean, like climbs? No, like literally walks on walls. And you're like, okay, you still have to do it. Because that's our job. But the most interesting thing, you're not just doing something. And you have to make a minimal enough amount of work to prove this character, right? And we're going to be talking more about that, but that's a very critical thing to understand, minimal enough. Because let's say if you're working on a cover system for the enemies. And many people start like, okay, the guys have poses like that, and they sit like that, and they move like that, and none of that really matters, because in normal shooter, you're gonna very rarely see what they do when they're hidden behind the cover. What you're actually gonna see how they pop out, like all the animation of exits, because all the cover system is basically a version of a glorious whack-a-mole game, right? You know, whack-a-mole is like something shows up, you hit it, something shows up, you hit it. So, that's what it is. So these animations are gonna have a lot of effect on how this enemy is perceived and how this enemy is played and how fun they are, because there are hundreds of ways, timings and spacings, how they can exit this cover. So to prototype something like that, you start there. But if you make a locomotion and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna make an idle loop, walk cycle, run cycle, it's fine. And like that is very dangerous, because if you're aiming for high quality, one day you're gonna add transitions, and they're gonna change the timings, they're gonna change responsiveness, they're gonna change anything. So when you have a prototype running around, just make up the loops, it conveys to the team a wrong idea of how this is gonna work. And designers start working in the timing of that, everything it goes, like they build spaces, they build distances based on that. And that's gonna change one day, and everybody gonna be unhappy. So sometimes you can prototype things with one super blocky animation, sometimes you need the whole set, sometimes you need half of it. So, but of course, you always want to do the minimum, because all of it gonna be thrown away, like potentially, with a very high chance. So second difference is that gameplay animator works not in linear volume, but with the volume of features, right? Because cinematic, no matter how sophisticated, it's like near chain of events. This causes this, this causes this, this causes this. Gameplay animation is very different. You have like your character running, moving, you have character taking cover, shooting, you have enemy taking cover, enemy walking, enemy idling, enemy going out of the cover, enemy taking damage. So it's all like these pieces of small few animations that you seed into the system. And then after you see them, over time, you start grow. And let's say at a certain point, you start running and entering the cover, right? So you need a cover entrance animation. It can be a slide, it can be a sprint, he can run and hit the wall and then slide down. The way how fast, so if you approach the cover and you go low earlier, so you hide your head earlier, so the enemy is gonna shoot you, like have less opportunity to shoot you. So all these things are very critical for the gameplay, but notice what happened. We had the separate systems, now we had animation that starts from run and ends in cover. So now if the cover animations are to change, we're gonna change all this entrance animation. And those are dependencies, and this is a very important thing to know. And it's a big part of the job for a gameplay animator to establish these dependencies between content. What is core, what is dependent, what is derivative? And track these dependencies and communicate them to the team and kind of really, really know them well. So, and then in mid-late production, you become a gatekeeper. But you don't become a gatekeeper like, you know, something that is, oh, I just decided to lock this down, so it's locked. No, like that's not quite your job to lock things down. Hopefully you have a producer who helps you with that. But what is important is that, like, okay, you're gonna polish all the like reloading animations that sits on top of cover. So before you do that, before you allocate like 1 month of the time, you go to your friendly designer and you say, hey, I'm about to allocate like 6 weeks worth of human resource to make something that sits on top of the system. Are we like really fine about the system? And like you're gonna get the reaction. And normally, like you don't need like 5 producers to sign on document or something, you know? It's like, it's more that normally you just see it, because if the guy goes like, yeah, I mean, I haven't been even thinking about that for 2 months, so I guess it's good. Hey, you guys, like, is it good? Oh, yeah, it's good. Okay, well. Or sometimes you just say cover system, and he's like, oh, that thing. And that's how you know that you shouldn't proceed, you know? Yeah. Yeah, there is one moment that I want to accent really heavily here, because, like, these dependencies, it sounds like a common sense. We all have dependencies, like level design and all kinds of stuff. But this thing is actually, it's really hard on a gameplay animator, right? Because especially in the better gameplay animator, the harder it is on him. Because basically what happens, you create this nice reloading animation, and you're most probably going to create it in just aim idle stance, because that's what you normally do. You press a trigger, you aim, you shoot, you reload, you aim. So, but you can also reload when you have a weapon down, when you are in crouch, when you're in cover, when you're prone, when you climb, like all kinds of things. So what we normally do, we're just going to take an upper body of this animation and we're going to propagate it through the system. So it's kind of polished animation, but at the same time, in all these other states, it's going to not look great. And later on, you're going to add like some IK, some technical solving, you're going to add more unique stances, you're going to rework it on layers. Like there's a lot of polish that can go into to making this look good. But right now, you place some minimal efforts, it works. So if you reload in the game, you see it reloading in all kinds of contexts, but it looks bad. And people start kind of like complaining, like, oh, like I'm playing in cover and it looks so bad. What's with our animation? Right? Like there is nothing wrong with our animation. It's just like it's a dependent set, and we don't want to expand our core sets before we prove everything that they sit on top. And this is really, really hard. But at the same time, like you have to resist it because you think, oh, I'm just gonna spend one day and I polish it, and you do it one time, twice, 3 times, 10 times, and now every time when you want to rework cover system, you have to rework all the cover animation and all the dependent animation. So price of every iteration becomes exponentially higher and higher. And so this is a really bad thing, but at the same time, if you just sit there silent, that's also kind of not the great way to go. So what you do, you communicate. You really communicate and you explain to people that, look, I mean, I would really like to fix it, but this is a dependent derivative content. So if we allocate resource right now here and you change what's underneath, that's a throwaway. And it's like very, very stupid throwaway polish. So yeah, that is quite important. All right. So now when we know the role of the responsible gameplay animator in production, let's talk about animation. So keyframe, motion capture, like why don't we just like keyframe everything, right? Because we've been doing that for years. Like for years we would just like prototype with putting few linear poses like with a linear interpolation, and we would block out our levels with that, and then only when we go to production we would like polish them or do something. So keyframing is good, and we still do that at the times, but there is few issues with that. So first issue is quite obvious. It's difficulty of creating and iterating big volumes of the assets, because modern games, not many, like people do notice it, but like they are really monstrous. Something like Last of Us has more animations that I think like 5 times more than any game I ever worked on. And it's like every generation it like really grows and grows exponentially, and the fidelity and the diligence, where we used to have 1 animation, now we have 50, because for different grips, for different weapons, for different handles, and so on and so forth. So system become more and more dense. System have more and more features, animation-driven features inside them. So if you try to keyframe all of that, like you can, but you're probably not going to be able to keyframe them by the book. You're not going to be able to spend all good time to search for good references, record the reference by yourself, block it out. You're probably going to go like just 3 poses, you know, the same cover exit. 1 pose here, 1 pose here, 1 pose here. And that brings us to the point 2. What we happen to find out over the years is that the difference between the keyframe prototype and the mock-up when it comes in, it's so drastic that it has a tendency to affect the game, not just the visual. And so coming back to this example, so you prototype the cover, your enemies can go like this, your enemies can go on the left, your enemies can go on the right, you prototype all these moves. You have nice 3 poses, 1 instance, 1 here, it holds, and then goes here. Everything is fine. And you have built the whole combat, like your test level or whatever, you're going to be shown to a publisher in 2 months. You build the whole room, and it all looks very blocky, it's white boxy, but it plays well. The enemies pop out, you shoot them, speeds, velocity, everything is good. And now you go and you shoot the data for the whole week. You shot this whole data, and you're super happy, stunts were crushing it, everything is so great. And you start chopping this data and placing it into the game, and like hundreds of animations a day, one after another, one after another. And what happens is the game starts to change, because the animation that you block out, they were nice and linear, but the performance, let's say the enemy in your game was like some non-professional trained rebel, so you want to see him scared, you want to see him hectic, not sure, so he goes in like this and he jitters. And so what happens, the timing change, head goes lower, weight bounces, like enemies are now harder to headshot. They are way harder to headshot. And this is just one of many, many micro properties that change. And because you kind of like, it all comes from the performance. I mean, you can't try to control stunts, and that's what we do. But at the same time, it's kind of, if you really focus on a great, interesting performance, it's really hard to like clamp all these unknowns from it. So this shock effect of the switch is something that gonna like make a big effect. And the main thing is, right, it's really important to understand that you think, oh, okay, well, we can quickly cut this or animations and edit, and it's something that why I really like the gameplay animation, because what you can do with this cover exit example. So your mockup came in jittery, and all the performance. So what I could do is I can edit it, make it stiffer on layers, filter out stuff, and I'm gonna make exactly the same version of the animation, but it's gonna be more stable. It's gonna have a head in the same height, and then I can put both of these animations into a blend pair and give this output to a designer. And designer, by just tweaking this value, he can go from more stiff, very predictable animation to more hectic, aggressive one, right? So now you have a tweakable that you can actually regulate difficulty of the enemy, and it reflects on the visual. This is so cool, right? But what happens in reality? You have 1 month for the demo, the game completely changed. There is a lot of pressure there. There is a lot of uncertainty because it needs to be good in 1 month. So you're not going to have a time to make all this creative, to find all the problems that making and make all the creative adjustments. You're going to start cutting through this content, making like desperate attempts and desperate cutting. And the worst stuff is, once again, dependencies. You're going to go through 400 animations, just crushing through them, making not the wise choices, making not the best editing. And you're going to work really hard, but it's just really hard to do it under the pressure, you know? So, and you're gonna make all these changes, and then the worst part is even not this milestone, because it's gonna affect all the milestones afterwards, because all the animations are dependent on what you did in this 1 month of crunch. They all gonna have to be consistent visual in what you did there. So basically mistakes like that, they tend to propagate through the whole project. And this is something that very, very important to be aware of. Now, well, this is really quite obvious. I mean, just the presentation quality. I mean, back on 14 years, we could show like completely white box, very bulky prototype to publisher and get funding. But nowadays, I mean, it still depends on who you work with. But I think very many clients would expect, if you're claiming that you're gonna make like a game with animation-heavy kind of content, they're gonna expect to see a better quality. And this is where mockup, like, linear keyframing and quick keyframe prototyping is kind of probably not going to deliver you a good enough amount in such a short time. All right. So now talking about motion capture. I mean, it's clear. I mean, we all talk about use motion capture for amount of animation, for a speed. But very often you talk to people and they have kind of really cynical aspect on it, and I kind of want to reiterate, because for me, like there is one not apparent consequence of what amount. Yes, there is amount, but what amount gives you? Amount gives you flexibility to test ideas, right? Because what you would need to spend a lot of time, like hours to keyframe, now you can do in like 1 minute on a stage. So that really enables you to try very interesting things. And when I just joined Remedy and we crashed and we were rebuilding all the pipeline, and before we got the budget allocated to Quantum Break, we didn't have any mockup. And I was trying to keyframe stuff to provide a better idea, and I noticed that I don't deliver as much as I want, and I can't try as many cool ideas as I want, because there are all kinds of crazy ideas flying around, but like you kind of have to choose. So we built 2 Kinect cameras in the back room, and we just started trying it, jumping around. And you know, it's like, it was really a relief, because somebody would say, it's like, oh, what if Jack does this? And you know, I would just go in and in 3 minutes just make it. And literally, it's like in 1 hour of shoot, you can create the content for like a few days worth of prototyping, and just go in and try stuff. So that's for me is the most joy and most interesting part that the motion capture kind of gives us. It gives us this ability to make things happen for the team, for us, and just try instead of doing our best to intelligently guess what might work or what might not. Now, speaking of disadvantages, I mean, there are different disadvantages. The one obvious is the content iteration speed is restricted. It's by how often you shoot. So let's say you have money, but your mockup stage is really far away, so you have to schedule it, and you can go in 2 months. That is like not the most horrible scenario, but it's not. It will work out for cinematics. For gameplay, it is very, very dangerous because once again, you shoot something, you prepare, you go in, you shot that, you walk into the studio, and they're like, "Hey, this is not bad. It would be even better if we do this," right? So it's very important if you make a animation-centric game to plan it in a way that whatever way you make, you always have an accessible, very frequently accessible mockup solution. Without that, it's really dangerous. Additional work, right, that's an interesting part because it's like you've been an animator, you've been doing mostly art, and now all of a sudden mockup shoot coming in, you have to do all the lists, you have to do all the scheduling, maybe your producers help you more, maybe less, but there is a lot of logistics work and the planning that goes into it. So it's, yes, you spend less time keyframing, blocking out, animating, but now you need to spend more time doing all this kind of utilitarian work to help the process happen. And we're going to talk a bit more about that. And well, subset of custom written tools is going to be required. So if you every time when you want to put a clip, you reach out, you get the optical data, you plot it onto the character, you do this, you do that. And so if it's a pipeline, it defeats the purpose. Once again, we use motion capture for speed. So in the end, you're going to have to build the pipeline where you can just like take the mockup from the library and drop on your newest rig on the newest character and not have any headache. And that will require some investments on a TD part or a technical artist or something like that. Now, speaking of how to alleviate some of these problems, for me, what works really great is that I change my culture of approaching. And I work on the motion capture shoots every day, right? So every morning I would come in and you catch up, you ask designers, how is this feature going, how is this progressing, how are the changes? And they're gonna drop a bunch of information on you. And I would gonna go and I'm gonna write it down, right into my Excel sheets, I'm gonna name animations, I'm gonna set what stunt I want to it, what kind of props I need, what kind of ideas I need. And so by spreading it, being 5 minutes every day, like you don't have this problem when you are going for a mock-up shoot. Now you need to spend a lot of time doing this and that. Now it's just like you have everything ready, you have to assemble it. It can take like 20 minutes. Other thing is, it's very important to document it, not just like what's happening, but like the key mechanical aspects of what's happening. Because when you're gonna be discussing it with a designer, he's gonna want to hit a certain speed. He's gonna have some like timing, like hit frames. He's gonna have something that he pretty confident that you're gonna nail. And like, you're not gonna remember it on the shoot. I mean, you're not. So it's very important to put all of it down at once. Then, I mean, it's just really small tips, sorting and grouping by the shoot days while considering. So this is a bit of a personal take. Once again, there is obviously the critical stuff with designers and the team waits from you. Like it's you have to shoot it first. But at the same time, because there is always infinite amount of stuff that designer wants from you, right? There is never time for these cool things that people mention, because sometimes said, oh, would it be cool if the enemy gonna fall and crawl last meter into the cover? And then guys like, maybe it would be cool, maybe it would make problems, we don't know. So you kind of always put it down, and then you never have actually time to try it, because there is infinite amount of stuff that is needed. So I kind of make a rule to make like half hour of the day and to try all these ideas. So I always put them down, and because chopping off half hour out of 8 doesn't really change anything in the big picture of things ever. But like trying these cool things is very, very important, because that's how you, to find unique things, you need to try unique things. If you just stick to know what you know, like you know that's working, you're gonna end up with doing same game again and again and again. So that's very important. Set dependency, that's what we said before. So if you have like 20 weapons, they all have a reloading animation, but your cover system is not locked, never shoot it. Like it's gonna take, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 hours on the set, but it's still potentially a waste. So always, when adding animation to the shoot list, very clearly identify their priority and if they sit on something that is not approved. So stunts involved, that's pretty clear. So you have a guy who is really good at military behaviors and tactics, and he's really stiff, and you have a guy who is more acting-centric. He is good at like being hectic. He's so like group these guys into separate days so they don't sit half day without work. Necessity of complex stage props, especially like stuff like climbing and custom setups for different tricks. It takes a lot of time to build this on a stage, right? This time is coming out of your budget, stand sitting there, everybody bored, waiting. So you want to build these complex props as few times as possible through production. So these, especially climbing animations, we try to group them into these very few shoots because, yeah, it's just very heavy and time consuming. Diversified routine of the shoot day, basically, once again, common sense, but I kept seeing people doing this. It's like, if you have, I don't know, 300 damage receiving animations, and the stunt is great, he's crushing as the crush mate, he's falling, he's doing the thing is, they are taught how to fall, but no matter how tough you are, no matter how professional you are, if you're hitting hard the crush mate hour after an hour, you're gonna have a horrible headache, right? So you never put the full day of damage receiving animations. Same stuff, like you have a lot of sprinting, don't put it straight after lunch. This is crazy, that's inhumane. And on the opposite side, so I mean, let's say you make a puzzle game and you have, I don't know, 300 door opening animation. They're not physically hard, they're not required, but they have to be in different demeanors, contain a little bit of acting. And you're like, hey, let's just put the whole day of the door opening. And then stunt is the whole day like, right? So as you can imagine, boredom is like your enemy. Like everybody on the set is bored, stuff is bored. It's like if it's too monotone, it's really hard to ask people for a good performance. So don't try to make monotone. And hopefully it's kind of closing out there. It's like it's about making creatively approaching to create this shoot day schedule to make all the team, all the crew on set and stunts happy and safe and make the whole day interesting, because people who are involved, people who are interested in what's going on and not bored and not overworked, they just perform so much better, and your day is so much better, and everybody's so much happier. And day after day, that really compounds to a big difference. All right. So, and last time, it's a bit of a personal thing, but yeah, preparing surplus of meaningful variations is basically, I noticed at a certain point, like I really like how certain things performed, and I stick to this stuff. So now I'm trying to force myself every time when I make a unique move, I don't know, something that is, I mean, some animations like, you know, pickup is just a pickup. You don't need to overwork it. But like if you do something like dodge or something, I always try to ask myself, what are 3 completely different ways this move could be performed, but that still satisfy design restrictions? And I try to always make the 3 ideas. And there's always one that you love most, always. Like there's one, I believe this is one that's gonna work. But in the reality, sometimes when you see it actually performed, you see it on the character, on the data, and you're like, oh, that is not so great. But then you're so stuck on this one idea that you don't have a plan B, right? You wasn't prepared that it's not gonna work out. And then that translates to stunt, because you're like, he kind of like, why did I do it bad? Did I do it good? What do you want? How we correct it? But you want something else, but you don't have the something else. So it's all like creates a stagger in the shoot. If you always have a plan B, then you kind of like, you always have something to switch to and try it, and it becomes like, you just work more professional, you don't stall the shoot, there is no weirdness going on, so it's really nice. Plus, you always, once again, finding unique things, trying unique things, so it's really good practice to have always this extra idea and just try it. Just spend 1 minute, just try it. It's like, maybe it looks good, maybe it looks horrible, maybe you have a good laugh, you know, that also really helps. So, what about quality? So quality does matter. I mean, the higher it is, the less compulsory work that you need to put into the cleanup, so that helps. But like, I have a strong belief that you can still do a lot even with less quality mock-up solutions. The reason is that most of the gameplay animation is heavily altered. Even in the games, like very realistic games where designers allow us to go way slower than, like, let's say Doom, it's still much faster than the real life. Right? There are all kinds of artifacts that come in from mockup. There are all kinds of indiscrepancies. And to fix and to make it sit on the actual character model, to make it play as required by design, it requires a lot of rework, right? So since you're reworking all of them, you can as well gonna fix most of the problems that are coming from the mockup. So the second thing is not the greatest example, but the context of animation placement in a game is rarely one-to-one match with like whatever you have on mockup. And we're putting our best efforts to match on the mockup stage what's happening in the game, but still it's like the models changing, the rigs changing, the skins changing, the props changing, so all of it changes. And eventually there's gonna be a moment that you're gonna go into animation and you're gonna need to fix all these indiscrepancies, right? But how do we fix these indiscrepancies? Ultimately, when the rework is really heavy, and as I noticed from gameplay animation, reworks are always really heavy, you're gonna go and you're gonna block out every key pose, every extreme, every breakdown in animation, and you're gonna fix it. So while you're already fixing it, I mean, you can as well fix whatever is wrong with the mockup. So it's kind of extra costs is there, but it's not as massive as people think, because just ultimately we retouch a lot, right? And this is, all right, this is very obvious. I once measured with a tracker how big on average characters. So I took 3 hours of footage of QA playing, and I just tracked how big the enemies are on the screen on average in full like HD 720p resolution on PC. And I found that they rarely see enemies bigger than 350 pixels tall. So, you know, when something that's small, big on screen, because you look on the data and it's like, oh, the finger is like sliding a bit and this, but like if the character is 350 pixels tall, you're never gonna see it. What you're gonna see is the demeanor. Because what's the worst stuff about enemies is that like you have a bunch of explosions going on and enemies like patrolling, right? Peacefully. Like this, for a lot of stuff in the games, and this is why we need so many animations, is like appropriate content for a context is what really creates a lot of quality. And animation polish, while it's not like broken completely or obviously wrong, is kind of like it's there. Sometimes it's important, sometimes you just can't see it. So there are very few exceptions. We're going to run quickly through this. So it's common sense. So if you do a lot of sprinting and the volume of your mockup is 3 meters, it's going to be really hard on you. And the other thing is like you want to make a brawling game about like Greek-Roman brawling something, but your mockup explodes every time you put 2 actors together. It confuses hands, swaps limbs, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be hard on you guys. It's common sense, but I'm telling you, because some people get so good with motion capture editing and so creative that they're like, designers come and like, can we now make a lot of climbing? And your height of your volume is like meter, well, 90 or 2 barely, and then markers start disappearing, and the guy's like, yeah, I can make a set, and I can record like the first step and then the second step, and I'm gonna match them together. So they try really hard to make it happen, but animation is still like discontinuous, very chopped, and a lot of work goes in. So it's like, it's really important to be objective. Like if your equipment is not good enough to do a lot of these things fast, then just like find another way. All right. So, this is learned a very hard way. When you have an expensive shoot somewhere far away, you pay for tickets, hotels, stunt, crew, mock-up rent, all kinds of stuff. So, and the second case scenario, if you have maybe your own mock-up solution in the house and it's like acceptable, but you have a demo really soon, so people are really waiting for what you're gonna deliver. It's really important to always have a double cast of stunts, and you need a good stunt, not just mediocre stunt, because this shoot must happen now for all the things out there to take place in time. So sometimes people, and I've seen it many times, when you save few bucks on this extra stunt, like it can cost you a lot. So you always need to have a replica, and you always need to have a second best guy and maintain relationships so you can always pull extra guy on the shoot. But once you already have them on the set, use them. So most of expensive mock-up stages would be completely fine if you run 2 characters in the volume. So you can do what you can do. You can just give exactly the same directions. So these guys are doing reloadings, and you give exactly the same directions. This is the timing. This is how you kneel. This is how you reload. And you rehearse. But one, let's say, can do a professional demeanor, and other can do like more amateur demeanor, right? Or let's say you can have like one guy doing a walk set and another guy doing run set. And there is all kinds of cool things, and it doesn't cost you extra. So in the same amount of time on this expensive stage, you're gonna get twice more animation data, which is pretty cool. All right. Invest in simple inventory and props. So yep. How to put it right? You know, the bane of motion capture and gameplay, because when motion capture just started to appear, it was really hard to add extra things to the set. Markers were getting confused, and there is all kinds of stuff were happening. So people tend to pretend that they carry a box. People tend to pretend that they're smashing a weapon or something. There was a lot of fake, and the weight and the things they are, like we see them thousands, millions times in our lives. Our eye is very sensitive to this fakery. So basically props are really important in motion capture animation. Even such a simple thing as a drawer, you know, because everything in games is like, this is a problem with digital things. Everything that looks fine in normal life, something like that, it looks stiffer in CGI. It looks less kind of flexible. There is something a little bit off about it. So, and everything is, you even making a drawer, and all the drawers in every game, they just like open like this, right? Just one axis. If you go there, you're gonna see one curve, but you can always ask yourself, what if it's actually, can it be an old wooden drawer so it has a little bit of the move, right? So then the actor can open it like this, right? So it can move it, open it like this. It can shake it. It can pull it to see what's inside. So there are all the interesting things you can now do with this prop that you never seen in a video game before. None of them have it. So all of a sudden, it's more interesting, it's unique, it's less stiff. There is interesting performance that can be done with this. A lot of things can be changed. Most of the things can be changed, and always find something interesting to do. Of course, talk with your level designers. If you have like super professional, nice modern drawers and they all of a sudden start moving, that's kind of weird. So build and widen the studio actor library. We tend to shoot a lot ourselves in the beginning of Quantum, and we tend to shoot like our very favorite stunt over and over. And over time, I found this very interesting thing. It's subtle. Like gamer will never tell you this happens. They can't see it. But you know, human motion is like a human voice. You can pretend like different voices and start speaking scary, you know, but like people who kind of get used to your voice, they always know it's you. There is some of this tells and arbitrary properties that never change. And the same with motion capture and like the movement. No matter how Star pretends and acts, if like you just use it over and over, everything in the game starts looking a little bit same, like moving a little bit same. It looks as the mesh looks, but it moves, it has these properties, and that's kind of becomes more and more boring over time. So it's much easier to work with this library, build this library of people. One is naturally very hectic and animated, and he's good with doing insecure, strange stuff. One is military and very sharp, very minimalistic. One is like big and aggressive guy. So when people like stunts are naturally good at this, like it's very easy, much easier to deliver a very vibrant, interesting animation throughout the game, right? But the thing is to find, like they also need to be good. So it's sometimes you have like this really good guy and the other guys are like kind of less experienced, and you're kind of like, maybe we should shoot with this good guy always. But like it's a temptation. Like you need to try people, you need to grow talents, because over the years it's gonna build up in this beautiful, beautiful library that you can use to creatively mesh these performances and content and animations out of them. But with just one stunt, it's always gonna be just one stunt, right? Involve actors beyond the shoot itself is basically, we always, and in Naughty Dog, I record my prototypes from the game on the day before shoot or on every day when we talked, and we show the video to the stunt. We show how it works. If they are gamers, we even call them into the house, we let them play. Like involved people always work much better than people who are not involved, who are just told do this and that. So, and sometimes people are like, oh, it looks ugly, it's not very understandable. Like we never care, no matter how ugly they look, we always show it to our guys, and that's been great. I mean, our main stunts are almost like part of the family at this point, and we like always see they are almost like a gatekeepers. They've been working first, Last of Us, Uncharted. They know all the characters. They remember how they perform things, and it's amazing. But it's amazing because they are so involved in the game, like as the rest of the team. Yeah, so that's an interesting story. I was very resistant on using military consultants for a long time because I met these guys who would come in and just tell you, you would ask them, how do you blind fire from the rifle when you run? And they would tell you, you don't ever do that, ever, ever. And I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of weapons, but we make entertainment. We don't do the tactics, especially like Quantum is not even trying to pretend to be the tactics. So I was like, eh. And then we start running into some issues with the guys, just like stupid mistakes with certain weapons, reloadings. And I eventually found this guy, and he was like amazing, and he is super passionate. He's traveling in all kinds of modern trainings, and now he's helping out on the next project. It's like he knows everything about weapons, and he's a gamer, so he's not Nazi this way. So, and he actually provided, the game is not out yet, but he provided them with very, very interesting tactics choices from like Brazilian SWAT teams and the certain ways. He knows so much. I mean, now we have all access to YouTube, but there is so much not high quality content is there. It's really hard to find something. You need to be an expert. And these guys are like a huge help for you. So once again, I mean, it's not about like you need to find the right guy, but to have the right guy, you need to be looking for the right guy. If you're never looking, you're never going to have it. And then it's kind of a closed circle. All right. So that's actually about it. But my first animation lead in Ukraine used to have a saying that talking about animation is like dancing about architecture. So pointless. And just not to leave you hanging, guys, and hopefully show what kind of things might or might not happen if you use these principles. I decided to conclude with a small video. Please enjoy. Thank you. By the way, the title is outdated. It was my Remedies title. I'm just an animator.
Any questions, guys? Please raise your hand. Yep, wait a second.
Well, are you currently working on The Last of Us Part 2, right?
Yes.
So what do you think, or what was the team reaction when you heard about the general talk about the animation on the trailer gameplay were fake, not real?
We're cool. I don't know. It's one thing we don't actually comment a lot, but I mean, you ask for a team reaction. I mean, Naughty Dog is extremely senior and calm team. And it's like people focused on what happened recently, but I mean, there always been a bit of controversy around Naughty Dog animations. Every time we show something, some people doubt, some people praise, you know. So I would say, honestly, for us, it's kind of a normal thing. I mean, I'm quite young dog, so I don't feel comfortable answering for everyone there, but I didn't see a lot of reaction in the company. People are like, kind of, that's happening, you know.
Thank you. One more over here.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's very thorough.
Thank you.
Since you're talking about gameplay animation, can you tell a few words about your interaction with gameplay programmers? Because I think that you definitely have some dependencies and interaction between.
Yeah. You know, it's such a broad subject. I'm gonna try to crush it shortly, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it's the other part of the job because there are like three parts mainly. Like one is running, like what I was talking about more today, is like running motion capture based pipeline to enable the team. It's kind of more a production kind of philosophy rather than an animation skill set, but you need to have it. The second part is just making pretty animations, right? It's your primary animation skill. And the third part is systems, networks, tech integration, all this kind. So yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't fit any of this into like the same talk, you know. But yeah, talking about programmers is like the third part. It really depends. Different companies run different pipelines. So some are more open, like so you would have something like a blueprints or some kind of like stack solution, state machine blend tree solution, where you can do a lot if you're a technical animator. Other companies just run this pipeline where coders hard code you stuff, exactly. So, and actually Last of Us has a very, Naughty Dog, we have this very unique pipeline that is not like anything I've seen or heard in the industry. So there is a lot of stuff that programmers hard code for us. So we work with them a lot. But then when we have replicas, we have a tools to kind of make a copies of what logic that exists and alter it animation-wise, quality, and so on. And we have a really strong toolkit for scripting tools. So basically, it's really hard to say because it's like, you know, it's example case-by-case scenario because there are systems that are very critical for the game, let's say melee. So combat, if you have a lot of melee combat, like it's something that designers are very interested in, coders very interested in, animator very interested in. It's something that, so you put all together and you really work as a team. Who gonna have upper hand is hard to say, you know, depends on the company. But to get it really good, you need to collaborate really well. If collaboration is not in place, it's really hard to achieve because they are very complex systems that require a lot of work on every one of those people. Then there are more features like, let's say, a pickup. And like, let's say, because you're doing a really high quality game, pickups also need to be good. They need to, for different items, for different heights. So there is a lot of animation machining that needs to go to make this all responsive and high quality. But at the same time, honestly, coder has no interest in how it works. He's not interested. Designer have one interest. He's interested that you don't remove controls while you're doing it. So basically, that's something that technical animator, at least me, like I would make a prototype myself, hard script, like do all the kind of almost all the logic in there, and then I'm just gonna come to the coder and he's gonna just put it into the engine for me, usually without telling a word for me, you know. So there are like these two very different sides where you work almost like a part as a small team, and like honestly, programmer and designer opinion is gonna be quite dominating, but like your job is to let them know what happens if they make like a bit wrong choice, what it means for animation quality, you know. But of course, the systems need to be very stable. They never need to break, and they never need to, and they need to play really well, right? So in other cases, like yeah, it's you just do your thing, nobody cares.
Anyone more? Yep.
So I have a very simple question. Mocap the deaths versus ragdoll. Do you have a preference?
Best is a combination of both. So there is a technique in Morphium. It's called soft key ragdoll. In Naughty Dog, I think it's like motor drain ragdoll. But basically, this technique where you try to play, and I have this death where they spin around and fall, and that's how it works. Because it tries to play animation, but if animation, like something starts pushing against body part, ragdoll starts playing just on a body part. And if body part collapses over a certain delta threshold, then the whole animation is cancelled and it explodes into a full ragdoll. So this is very nice because you can, after very cool animation for like perfect conditions, just on a flat ground, but if it's gonna hit a wall, if it's gonna hit something, ragdoll gonna take over and continue smoothly. So this is kind of the best technique. Overall, the problem with using ragdoll instead of animation is like, it's cheap, it caters to the environment. The problem with ragdoll does impact. Ragdoll doesn't do pain. And pain or expression of pain and fidelity is something that's really important. It's like an equation of satisfaction. I'm sorry, that sounds brutal, but that like you make a damage as a player for an enemy, you want to see the effect. It's two parts that are very important for satisfaction, and that's what like a lot of damages there. I made special damages when you do a burst fire weapons like Uzi, when you have shotgun, there are special damages. So because I want to validate this impact and how like enemies feel. And that ragdoll doesn't author that for you. You can play around with physics, but they're going to be pretty same. So doesn't do pain, doesn't do creative authoring. If you don't have money to produce this many animations, then of course, but honestly, in my opinion, if you're making a combat-centric game, I would drop everything except the death and damage animations. if there is a set I would do just locomotion and those, because they are so important for like selling the impact and selling like power of your weapons. Any more?
We'll let you go.
Yeah.
Next, thank you
guys,
so much.
Please come in, if not just about mockup, anything related to gameplay, animation, systems, and artwork. I'm here. I'm very approachable and here and happy to help. If you have any questions, please come.